Miranda Wilson, 32, standing frozen in the doorway of my sister Rachel's luxurious anniversary party. The room suddenly silent as Rachel's mother-in-law, Evelyn, gasped and exclaimed, "That's her?" Rachel's immediate eye roll contrasted sharply with Evelyn's shock. I hadn't seen my sister in 5 years. Not since she married Bradley Thompson, the man who had once been my fiancé. The whispers started immediately. Little did anyone know that my appearance wasn't coincidental. I came with evidence that would shatter the perfect family facade Rachel had carefully crafted. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching this from. Every time I share the story about family betrayal and the justice that followed, I'm amazed at how many of you have experienced similar situations with siblings or loved ones. If my journey of standing up against my sister's manipulation resonates with you, please hit that like button. It took me years to find the courage to confront my family's lies, and your support means everything. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength when those closest to you become your greatest betrayers. Growing up with Rachel was complicated. Despite being 3 years older than me, we were once close, at least that's what I believed. I still remember us sharing a bedroom with matching pink bedspreads, whispering secrets late into the night, and promising to always have each other's backs. As the younger sister, I idolized Rachel with her perfect grades and seemingly effortless beauty. She was the golden child, the one who made our parents beam with pride at every dance recital, award ceremony, and graduation. By contrast, I was always the creative one, which in my family was code for unreliable. Where Rachel excelled in structured environments, I thrived in artistic chaos. My paintings hung in local galleries while still in high school, but somehow my achievements always seemed less tangible, less worthy of celebration in our household. During Rachel's high school graduation dinner, my father toasted to our first doctor in the family, while my mother wiped away proud tears. When I announced my scholarship to art school 3 years later, my father simply asked, "But how will you support yourself?" The pattern was established early. Rachel was the investment, I was the risk. Despite this imbalance, I never resented Rachel, not really. I accepted my place in the family hierarchy and found validation elsewhere. I built a small but supportive group of friends who valued my creativity and perspective. I found mentors who saw potential in my unconventional thinking. By 25, I had established myself as a respected commercial artist with steady clients, proving my parents' financial concerns unfounded. That's when I met Bradley Thompson. He came into the design agency where I worked, representing a financial services firm that needed rebranding. During our first meeting, he asked questions about my creative process that no client had ever bothered with before. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding the why behind my designs, not just the final product. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into friendship, and then something deeper. Bradley was everything I never thought I deserved: stable, successful, and completely enamored with me. Where my family saw flaws, he saw uniqueness. When I rambled about color theory or composition, he listened intently instead of checking his phone. For the first time, I felt truly seen and valued. After dating for 2 years, Bradley proposed during a weekend trip to the coast, presenting a vintage emerald ring that perfectly matched my unconventional taste. I said yes, without hesitation. Rachel's reaction to our engagement was subdued. "Are you sure you're ready for this commitment?" she asked, emphasizing commitment, as though it was a concept beyond my grasp. At family gatherings, she would casually mention clients she'd introduced to Bradley or reference inside jokes from their meetings. Bradley helped me understand my investment options. She'd explain when I questioned these interactions. "We're practically family already. It's completely innocent." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I ignored the slight discomfort I felt when Bradley's phone would light up with Rachel's name, or when he mentioned having lunch with her to discuss wedding plans. I dismissed the way her hand lingered on his arm at our engagement party, attributing my concerns to residual insecurity from years of being second best. 3 months before our wedding, I borrowed Bradley's laptop to finalize some design details for our invitations. When I opened the browser, his messaging app was still logged in. I wasn't looking for anything. I swear I wasn't. But there it was, a thread of messages between Bradley and Rachel spanning months. Flirtatious at first, then explicit. Plans made and fulfilled. Photos exchanged. Declarations of feelings that went far beyond the boundaries of future in-laws. The most recent message from Rachel sent just hours earlier. She's always been naive. She'll never suspect a thing. After the wedding, we'll figure out our next steps. My world imploded. With shaking hands, I took screenshots of everything and sent them to my own phone, then closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it. For days, I walked around in a daze, trying to make sense of this betrayal. Was I overreacting? Was I misinterpreting their relationship? The gaslighting I'd experienced my entire life made me doubt my own perception. I finally confronted them together at our family Sunday dinner. I chose a public setting, believing they wouldn't make a scene. I was wrong. Are you serious right now? Rachel had laughed, looking around the table at our parents. Mom, Dad, do you hear this? Miranda thinks Bradley and I are having some sort of affair. Her tone dripped with condescension. Bradley reached for my hand across the table. Sweetheart, I think you're stressed about the wedding. Rachel's been helping me plan some surprises for you. That's all. Those messages must have been taken out of context. Show them, I demanded, my voice barely a whisper. Show them the messages. I deleted them, Bradley said smoothly. They were about your wedding gift. I didn't want you to accidentally see them. When I pulled out my phone to show the screenshots, I discovered they had all been deleted. Later, I would learn that Rachel had used my parents' Wi-Fi to access my cloud account. She had always been the tech-savvy one who set up everyone's devices. I had no proof, only my word against theirs. Honey, my mother said gently, you've always had an active imagination. Remember when you were convinced your art teacher was stealing your ideas? Or when you thought your college roommate was poisoning your food? I stared at her in disbelief. Those incidents had never happened. They were fabricating a history of paranoia that didn't exist. Miranda, my father sighed, have you been taking your medication regularly? What medication? I asked, bewildered. Rachel jumped in, her voice soft with practiced concern. It's okay to admit you've stopped, sis. We all understand your condition makes it hard to stay consistent. In that moment, I realized the depth of Rachel's manipulation. She hadn't just stolen my fiancé. She had been systematically undermining my credibility for years, planting seeds of doubt about my mental stability. My parents looked at me with a mixture of pity and embarrassment, fully believing I was having some sort of breakdown. I left the dinner without finishing my meal. Within a week, Bradley had called off our engagement, citing concerns about my erratic behavior. My parents suggested I seek inpatient treatment. Friends who had heard Rachel's version of events, that I had accused her of ridiculous things due to pre-wedding anxiety and undiagnosed issues, slowly distanced themselves. I lost everything. My fiancé, my family support, many of my friends, and even some clients who heard rumors about my instability. With nothing left to keep me there, I packed what remained of my life into my car and drove across the country, determined to start over somewhere no one knew my name or my story. For 5 years, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Holiday calls that lasted exactly 15 minutes. Birthday cards with generic messages. I built a new life in Denver, rebranding myself professionally and personally. I went back to school, becoming a forensic accountant, a career that utilized my attention to detail and analytical thinking. The irony wasn't lost on me that I now specialized in uncovering financial deception and fraud, methodically revealing truths hidden beneath perfect-looking facades. I dated occasionally, but kept people at arm's length. Trust didn't come easily anymore. Instead, I channeled my energy into building a reputation for thoroughness and accuracy. By 32, I had established myself at a respected firm that specialized in investigating nonprofits and charitable foundations. I had a small but loyal circle of friends, a comfortable apartment, and a life that, while not extraordinary, was entirely mine. I had almost convinced myself I was healed when the invitation arrived. The cream-colored envelope arrived on a Tuesday, its heavyweight paper and gold embossing screaming luxury before I even opened it. The return address showed the Thompson family estate, a place I'd visited only twice during my engagement to Bradley. My hands trembled slightly as I slid my finger under the seal. You are cordially invited to celebrate the 5th wedding anniversary of Rachel and Bradley Thompson, read the elaborate script. The details outlined a weekend-long celebration at the Thompson family estate, culminating in a formal gala on Saturday evening. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized as Rachel's, was a personal note. Time heals all wounds. We miss you. I stared at the invitation for a full minute before walking directly to my trash can and dropping it in. The audacity was breathtaking. 5 years of silence, and now I was supposed to celebrate the marriage that had been built on the ruins of my own happiness? I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to push the invitation from my mind. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Miranda Wilson? The woman's voice was warm but authoritative. Yes, that's me. This is Evelyn Thompson, Bradley's mother. I hope I'm not disturbing you. My grip tightened on the phone. I had met Evelyn only a handful of times during my engagement to Bradley. She had always been polite but reserved, a woman who clearly valued her family's social standing and traditions. I understand you received an invitation to Rachel and Bradley's anniversary celebration, she continued without waiting for my response. I wanted to personally encourage you to attend. Mrs. Thompson, I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. I appreciate the invitation, but I think we both know that would be inappropriate. On the contrary, she replied, I think your presence is essential. Things aren't what they seem, Miranda. I can't say more over the phone, but I believe you deserve to see for yourself. Her cryptic response left me unsettled. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, she interrupted. I'm merely extending a personal invitation. The choice is yours, of course. But sometimes, closure requires confrontation.
She paused.
Rachel doesn't know I'm calling you. After she hung up, I sat in confused silence. What did Evelyn mean by things aren't what they seem? Was this some sort of trap, a way for Rachel to publicly humiliate me again? Or was something else happening in the perfect Thompson-Wilson merged family? The next day, I brought up the invitation during my monthly session with Dr. Abrams, the therapist who had helped me rebuild my sense of self after the betrayal. What do you want to do? She asked after I explained the situation. Part of me wants to go just to show them I survived. I admitted that they didn't break me. But another part is terrified of being hurt again, of falling into whatever game Rachel might be playing. Dr. Abrams nodded thoughtfully. Closure is a complicated concept. Sometimes we find it in confrontation, sometimes in walking away. There's no universal right answer. She leaned forward slightly. But I know you, Miranda. You're not the same vulnerable young woman you were 5 years ago. You've built boundaries and resilience. The question isn't whether you can handle seeing them again. I believe you can. The question is, what do you hope to gain? Her words stayed with me as I left her office. What did I hope to gain? Vindication? Revenge? Simple curiosity about Evelyn's cryptic comments? That evening, I found myself doing something I had avoided for years, looking up Rachel and Bradley on social media. Their profiles were filled with professional photos of charity galas and community service events. 3 years ago, they had established the Thompson Foundation for Children's Education, which had quickly gained prominence in philanthropic circles. Rachel was listed as executive director, Bradley as chairman of the board. Their online presence was impeccable. All designer clothes, meaningful gazes into each other's eyes, and heartfelt captions about making a difference. Comment sections overflowed with praise for their generosity and leadership. They had transformed my nightmare into their fairy tale, complete with a philanthropic happily ever after. Something about their perfect charitable image nagged at me professionally. On impulse, I looked up the Thompson Foundation's public financial disclosures. As a forensic accountant specializing in nonprofits, I knew what red flags to look for, and I found several. vague expense categories, unusually high administrative costs, significant consulting fees paid to shell companies that, with minimal digging, I discovered were registered to addresses connected to Rachel's college friends. Nothing explicitly illegal jumped out, but the patterns were familiar enough to raise my professional suspicions. I spent the next several evenings conducting deeper research, examining public records and cross-referencing donor lists with business connections. The more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. The foundation reported impressive program outcomes, but provided minimal documentation. They claimed to serve thousands of children but had a suspiciously small operational footprint. Was I looking for problems because of my history with them? Possibly. But my professional training had taught me to trust patterns, and these patterns suggested potential financial impropriety. If nothing else, the foundation appeared to be operating in an ethical gray area, allowing Rachel and Bradley to enjoy a lavish lifestyle under the guise of charitable work. 2 weeks before the anniversary weekend, I made my decision. I called Evelyn Thompson back. "I'll be attending," I said simply when she answered. "I'm glad," she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Pack something spectacular. Rachel always comments on your unconventional style. I think it's time you showed her just how stunning unconventional can be." The comment was unexpected coming from the traditionally elegant Evelyn Thompson, but it solidified my resolve. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing meticulously. I chose a sleek emerald dress that highlighted my confidence rather than seeking attention. I organized my research into a discrete digital file. I rehearsed calm, measured responses to every scenario I could imagine. The 5-hour drive back to my hometown gave me time to process the swirl of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. I passed familiar landmarks that triggered memories: the coffee shop where Bradley and I had our first unofficial date, the gallery that had featured my work, the park where he had proposed. I allowed myself to feel the pain of these memories without letting them consume me. This was no longer about a broken heart or a stolen future. This was about truth. I checked into a hotel rather than staying with my parents, who had left increasingly anxious voicemails since learning I would attend the anniversary event. "We're so happy you're coming, honey," my mother had said, her voice strained. "It's been too long. Rachel is thrilled you've accepted." Somehow, I doubted that very much. The Thompson estate was even more imposing than I remembered. Situated on 15 acres of manicured grounds, the colonial mansion stood as a testament to old money and careful preservation of status. As my rental car crunched along the circular gravel driveway, I noted the valet service, the string quartet playing on the front lawn, and the uniformed staff directing guests. The evening air carried the scent of expensive floral arrangements and subtle wealth. I took a final moment in my car to center myself. "You're not here as a victim," I whispered to my reflection. "You're here as a witness." With that mantra firmly in mind, I handed my keys to the valet and approached the entrance. The foyer was a study in calculated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, while family photographs, artfully arranged to tell the story of Rachel and Bradley's perfect union, lined the walls. I noticed immediately that any photos including me had been carefully edited out or replaced. It was as if my chapter in their story had been completely erased. "Name, please?" asked a young man with a tablet at the entrance to the main ballroom. "Miranda Wilson," I replied, watching his eyes widen slightly in recognition. "Of course, Ms. Wilson. You're at table 3. He seemed unsure whether to say more, finally adding, "It's nice to have you here," with what appeared to be genuine warmth. I stepped into the ballroom, immediately assessing the scene. At least 100 guests mingled throughout the space, many of whom I recognized from my previous life. Business associates of the Thompson family, former friends, extended family members who had attended what should have been my wedding. A few glanced my way, double-taking when they realized who I was. My parents stood near the bar, looking older than 5 years should account for. My mother spotted me first, her champagne glass freezing halfway to her lips. She nudged my father, whose expression cycled rapidly from shock to discomfort to a forced smile. They made their way over to me, with visible reluctance. Miranda, my mother said, air kissing near my cheek. You look different. Successful. I corrected gently. I look successful, Mom. My father cleared his throat. We didn't know if you'd actually come. Evelyn Thompson was very persuasive. I replied, watching their expressions carefully. Something flickered across my mother's face. Concern? Fear? Just be civil, please, my father murmured. This is an important night for your sister. I'm always civil, Dad, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I learned that from Rachel. Before they could respond, a collective shift in the room's energy signaled the arrival of the guests of honor. Rachel entered on Bradley's arm, both of them picture-perfect in coordinated evening wear. She wore a cream designer gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her hair styled in an elegant updo that highlighted diamond earrings I recognized as our grandmother's. Bradley looked distinguished in a classic tuxedo, his posture confident as they greeted their guests. I positioned myself to observe rather than be immediately seen. Rachel worked the room with practiced charm, touching arms, laughing at appropriate moments, and ensuring every guest felt personally welcomed. Bradley followed her lead, though I noticed a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. I was contemplating the best moment to make my presence known when Evelyn Thompson appeared beside me. Miranda, she said warmly, taking both my hands in hers. You came. As promised, I replied, studying her face. Evelyn was in her 60s but looked younger, her silver hair styled elegantly, her posture regal, without seeming rigid. There was an intelligence in her eyes that I had never fully appreciated during my engagement to her son. You look magnificent, she said, appraising my emerald dress with approval. Success becomes you. Thank you. You look well yourself. She lowered her voice. Let's make an entrance, shall we? I find that with Rachel, timing is everything. With Evelyn's hand firmly on my arm, we moved toward the center of the room where Rachel was holding court with a group of donors. Bradley saw us first, his champagne glass stilling midair as his eyes locked with mine. The color drained from his face, so rapidly I momentarily feared he might faint. Rachel, noticing his distraction, turned to follow his gaze. Her expression shifted from practiced charm to cold shock in an instant before she composed herself. But not before executing a perfect, dismissive eye roll that transported me back to our childhood. The room fell into one of those peculiar lulls in conversation that sometimes happen at large gatherings. In that moment of relative quiet, Evelyn's voice carried clearly as she said, Rachel, look who's finally arrived. Isn't it wonderful? Rachel's smile was brittle. Miranda, what a surprise. Is it? I asked pleasantly. I RSVP'd weeks ago. Yes, but I never thought you'd actually come, she replied, her voice honeyed with false warmth. It's been 5 years? 5 years, 2 months, and 16 days, I said. But who's counting? Bradley stepped forward, visibly uncomfortable. Miranda, it's good to see you. You look well. Thank you, Bradley. Congratulations on your anniversary. And on the foundation's success. It's making quite an impression in philanthropic circles. Something flickered in his eyes. Wariness, perhaps recognition that my comment carried deeper meaning. Before he could respond, Rachel slipped her arm possessively through his. We're very proud of what we've accomplished, she said. The foundation serves over 2,000 children annually. We've revolutionized educational access in underserved communities. Impressive numbers, I replied. I'd love to hear more about your operational model sometime. Rachel's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Though I doubt financial details would interest you much. You were always more creative than analytical. Evelyn cleared her throat. Actually, Rachel, you might not be aware that Miranda is now a forensic accountant. She specializes in nonprofit compliance and transparency. Isn't that fascinating? The flash of alarm that crossed both Rachel and Bradley's faces was brief, but unmistakable. Rachel recovered quickly, laughing as though Evelyn had said something amusing rather than threatening. How unexpected, she said. From art to accounting. What prompted such a dramatic change? Let's just say I developed an interest in uncovering things that people try to hide, I replied evenly. An awkward silence fell over our small group. Bradley broke it with forced joviality. Well, we should continue greeting our guests. Miranda, I hope we can catch up properly later. As they moved away, I noticed Rachel immediately pull Bradley into an intense whispered conversation, glancing back at me with poorly concealed concern. That went even better than I hoped, Evelyn murmured beside me. You should see your table assignment. I made sure you'd have an educational evening. Throughout dinner, I collected information like small puzzle pieces. I was seated with Bradley's cousin Marcus, who worked in investment banking and who, after several glasses of wine, mentioned concerns about Bradley's financial management decisions. Across from me was Diane, a board member of the Thompson Foundation, who seemed eager to establish that her involvement was purely advisory and that she signed no financial documents. Most revealing was my conversation with Peter, a major donor who leaned close after dessert to ask if I thought the foundation's recent restructuring was cause for concern. When I asked for clarification, he mentioned rumors of investments being redirected, program results being overstated, and staff departures under unusual confidentiality agreements. From my strategic position, I could observe Rachel and Bradley at the head table. Their public display of affection seemed mechanical, activated primarily when they noticed people watching. During moments they thought themselves unobserved, they barely looked at each other. Once, I caught Rachel checking her phone under the table, her expression darkening at whatever she saw there. As the evening progressed into dancing and more casual mingling, I overheard fragments of conversations that painted a concerning picture. Heard they're downsizing the main office. Pulled Tyler out of the private school. Argument in the restaurant was so bad the manager asked them to leave. The perfect marriage and successful charity depicted on social media appeared increasingly like a carefully constructed illusion, one that might be starting to crack. As the evening wore on, I found myself alone at the bar, observing the dance floor where Rachel was now performing an elaborate waltz with Bradley's father, her smile radiant under the chandelier lights. A server refilled my sparkling water, and I thanked her with a genuine smile, something that apparently caught Evelyn's attention as she approached. You always did treat service staff like actual humans, she observed, sliding onto the bar stool beside me. Rachel treats them like furniture, present but invisible. I worked as a waitress through art school, I replied. Changes your perspective. Evelyn signaled the bartender for a scotch, neat. I never approved of her, you know, she said after taking a measured sip. Not for Bradley, not as a daughter-in-law, and certainly not as the face of our family foundation. I studied her carefully, trying to discern her motivation. You invited me here tonight. Why? Evelyn's gaze was direct, unflinching. Because you deserve to know the truth, and because my son deserves the consequences of his actions. She rotated her glass slowly. Bradley tried to call off the wedding to Rachel 3 times. The statement hit me like a physical blow. What? The first time was 2 weeks after your engagement ended. He came to his father and me, absolutely distraught. Said he'd made a terrible mistake. The second time was a month before the wedding. The third was the night before. She took another sip of scotch. Each time, Rachel managed to convince him to go through with it. Or perhaps convince isn't the right word. What is the right word? I asked, my throat tight. Blackmail, Evelyn said simply. Rachel has something on Bradley from his college years. Something that would destroy not just his reputation, but potentially result in criminal charges.
She met my eyes.
I don't know what it is. He refuses to tell us, says he's protecting the family. But whatever it is, Rachel has used it to control him for 5 years. I processed this information slowly. If that's true, why haven't you intervened before now? Pride, she admitted. Thompsons don't air their dirty laundry. We manage problems privately. But then the foundation issues started. She lowered her voice. Financial improprieties that could implicate the entire family. When I confronted Bradley, He finally admitted Rachel has been systematically siphoning funds through shell companies and fabricated program expenses. Why tell me this? Why not go to the authorities? Because Rachel has positioned herself as the foundation's public face while making Bradley the legal signatory on everything questionable. If it all comes crashing down, my son goes to prison while she plays the betrayed wife. Evelyn's expression hardened. But you're the variable she never accounted for. The living proof of her first betrayal, now equipped with exactly the professional skills to unravel her financial schemes. Before I could respond, I noticed my parents approaching, their expressions anxious. They'd been watching my conversation with Evelyn from across the room. "Miranda," my mother began tentatively, "we hope you're having a nice time." "It's certainly been informative," I replied. "Evelyn has been filling me in on some family history." My father's posture stiffened. "Evelyn, would you excuse us for a moment? We'd like to speak with our daughter privately." Once Evelyn had graciously departed, my father leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "Whatever you're planning, Miranda, please reconsider. This isn't the time or place." "Planning?" I repeated innocently. "I'm just enjoying the party, Dad. Catching up with old acquaintances." My mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for mine. "Honey, we know we haven't always been fair to you, especially regarding what happened with Bradley." This unexpected acknowledgement caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" My parents exchanged a look laden with unspoken communication. Finally, my father sighed heavily. "We've had doubts about Rachel's version of events for years," he admitted. "Things she said that didn't quite add up. Behaviors we've observed. But by the time we started questioning things, you were gone and Rachel and Bradley were married." "What your father is trying to say," my mother interjected, "is that we made a mistake. We believed Rachel when she told us you had a history of mental health issues. That you had fabricated the affair allegations because of deep-seated jealousy and instability." A cold anger washed over me. "And you never thought to verify any of this? To ask me about this supposed history of mental illness that conveniently explained away her betrayal?" "She had documentation," my father said quietly. "Medical records, therapist notes. She showed us evidence." "Forged," I said flatly. "All of it." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We realize that now. After you left, Rachel's stories became more elaborate, more controlling. She began isolating us from friends who asked too many questions. When your cousin Jamie mentioned seeing Bradley with another woman 2 years ago, Rachel ensured she was no longer invited to family functions." I pulled my phone from my clutch, unlocking it to access the preliminary financial documents I'd compiled. "While we're sharing revelations, you should know that your perfect daughter and her husband appear to be running a sophisticated financial fraud operation through their charity." Their expressions shifted from remorse to shock as I showed them evidence of irregular transactions, inflated program numbers, and questionable shell companies. "This can't be right," my father whispered, the color draining from his face. "The Thompson Foundation is respected throughout the state. They've received awards for their work." "Image and reality are often different things," I replied. "Something I learned the hard way 5 years ago." Our conversation was interrupted by Bradley's cousin Marcus, who approached with an empty champagne glass and a slightly loosened tie. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, but I couldn't help overhearing mention of financial concerns. He glanced around before continuing. "If you're looking into the foundation's finances, you should know about the investor meeting last month. Several major donors are quietly withdrawing support after questions about program outcomes couldn't be adequately answered." As Marcus shared more details about growing concerns within the foundation's inner circle, I noticed Rachel watching us intently from across the room. She whispered something to Bradley, who immediately began making his way toward us. Before he reached us, I excused myself to visit the restroom, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. The revelations were coming faster than I had anticipated, pieces falling into place with disturbing clarity. As I exited the restroom, I nearly collided with Natalie Thompson, Bradley's younger sister who had been studying abroad during most of my relationship with him. "Miranda," she said, grabbing my arm and pulling me into a nearby study. "I've been trying to catch you alone all evening." "Natalie?"
What's going on?
She closed the door behind us, her expression serious. "I have something you need to see." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages between her and Bradley spanning the past year. In them, Bradley repeatedly expressed concerns about ours financial decisions and fears about legal exposure. "My brother is many things," Natalie said, "including a coward who helped destroy your life. But he's not a financial criminal by nature." That's all, Rachel. She's been systematically draining the foundation while building a separate nest egg. Bradley discovered it 6 months ago, but can't confront her because of whatever she has on him. "Why are you showing me this?" Natalie's expression hardened. "Because I was at your engagement party, Miranda. I saw how happy my brother was with you. Truly happy. Not this performative garbage he displays now. And because Rachel has turned my parents' legacy into her personal piggy bank while isolating our family from anyone who questions her narrative." She scrolled to another message, this one from just 2 days ago. "If things go sideways at the anniversary, make sure Miranda gets this." Attached was a folder labeled insurance. "He sent this to me as a safeguard," Natalie explained. "I think he suspects Rachel knows about his discovery of her financial schemes. He's afraid of what she might do." "What's in the folder?" I asked. "I don't know. It's encrypted. He said you'd know how to open it when the time came." She forwarded the file to my email. "Whatever happened 5 years ago, Miranda, I believe you were the victim, not the villain. And I think it's time everyone else knew that too." As I left the study, I overheard raised voices from a nearby room. Through the partially open door, I glimpsed Rachel and Bradley in what appeared to be an intense argument. "They're asking questions about the Westlake project disbursements," Bradley hissed. "We can't keep covering our tracks forever." "We can and we will," Rachel replied coldly. "Everything is documented exactly as we planned. Just stick to the script." "And what about Miranda?" Bradley demanded. "Why is she really here? Did you see who she was talking to? Your parents, my mother, Marcus? She's a forensic accountant now, for God's sake." Rachel's laugh was chilling. "Always so worried about Miranda. Some things never change, do they? Don't worry about my sister. I've managed her before, and I can manage her again." I backed away silently, my mind racing with all I had learned. As I returned to the ballroom, I caught my mother's eye across the room. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of support I hadn't seen directed my way in years. If you've ever discovered someone you trusted was living a double life, you know that sickening feeling in your stomach. That moment when puzzle pieces suddenly click together, revealing a picture you never wanted to see. I'd felt it 5 years ago, and I was feeling it again now. But this time, I wasn't alone in seeing the truth. If you're watching this and nodding because you've been there too, hit that like button. The hardest part of exposing family deception isn't gathering evidence, it's finding the courage to use it. Stay with me as I reveal what happened next, when I finally confronted my sister with 5 years of carefully gathered truth. The evening was progressing toward its pinnacle, the anniversary toast scheduled for 9 o'clock. Guests were directed to find their seats as servers refilled champagne glasses in preparation. Rachel and Bradley took their positions at the center of the room, the perfect picture of successful partnership as camera flashes captured their practiced smiles. I positioned myself strategically, not at my assigned table but near the service entrance where I could observe without being immediately visible. From my vantage point, I watched Evelyn speak briefly with the event coordinator, who nodded and made adjustments to the microphone setup. My parents settled at their table, my mother repeatedly glancing around the room as if searching for me. Natalie caught my eye from across the space and gave me a subtle thumbs up. The room quieted as Bradley's father tapped his glass and welcomed everyone to this celebration of an extraordinary union. He spoke about legacy, family values, and the Thompson tradition of excellence, all while his wife Evelyn maintained a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When he finished, Rachel stepped forward, resplendent in her designer gown, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. She accepted the microphone with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to public speaking. 5 years ago, she began, her voice warm and measured, I married not just the love of my life, but my partner in every sense of the word. Together, Bradley and I have built not only a marriage but a mission. She gazed adoringly at Bradley, who maintained his smile despite the tension evident in his jaw. The Thompson Foundation represents everything we believe in: opportunity, education, and the power of giving back. Rachel continued, highlighting their accomplishments and future vision. We've touched the lives of thousands of children, created educational pathways where none existed before, and established a model of philanthropic excellence that will outlast us both. As she spoke, I activated the secure messaging app on my phone, sending pre-prepared evidence packages to specific recipients: the State Attorney General's Office, the IRS Nonprofit Investigation Unit, and 3 journalists who specialized in financial crime reporting. Information I had compiled and verified over the past 2 weeks, augmented by what I'd learned tonight. Marriage, like charity, requires transparency, integrity, and unwavering commitment to shared values, Rachel was saying, raising her champagne glass. I invite you all to toast to 5 extraordinary years and to the many more that await us. As glasses were raised around the room, I stepped forward, my own champagne glass in hand. I'd like to add to that toast, if I may, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. Rachel's expression flickered between surprise and alarm before settling into a tight smile. Miranda, how unexpected. Of course. I moved to the center of the room, accepting the microphone from a wide-eyed server. For those who don't know me, I'm Miranda Wilson, Rachel's younger sister. I paused, meeting the curious gazes of guests who sensed the tension but didn't yet understand its source. 5 years ago, I was engaged to Bradley Thompson. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Those who hadn't known this piece of history looked between Rachel and me with newfound interest. Those who had known looked distinctly uncomfortable. Our engagement ended rather abruptly. I continued calmly, when I discovered text messages between Bradley and Rachel revealing their affair, an affair that had been ongoing throughout much of my relationship with him. Miranda, Rachel interjected sharply, this is hardly the time or place for your delusions. We've all been patient with your issues, but this is beyond inappropriate. I smiled. Interesting choice of words, Rachel. Delusions. Issues. Terms you've used strategically for years to discredit me. But tonight, I'm not here to relitigate the past. I'm here because of the present. I turned slightly to address the wider audience. When I received an invitation to this anniversary celebration, I was naturally surprised. Why would my sister and her husband want me here after 5 years of estrangement? But then I received a call from Evelyn Thompson, encouraging me to attend, suggesting things weren't what they seemed. Bradley shifted uncomfortably beside Rachel, whose smile had frozen in place. As many of you know, I'm now a forensic accountant specializing in nonprofit compliance. So, naturally, I was curious about the Thompson Foundation for Children's Education, this beacon of philanthropic excellence my sister just described. I removed a small digital device from my clutch and connected it to the venue's presentation system, a connection Evelyn had arranged earlier. The large screens around the room that had been displaying professional photos of Rachel and Bradley now showed financial spreadsheets and transaction records. What I found was concerning, to say the least. The foundation reports serving over 2,000 children annually through educational programs, yet financial records indicate actual program expenses sufficient for only about 300 participants. The difference, approximately $4.2 million over 3 years, has been directed to shell companies registered to addresses connected to Rachel's former college roommates. Gasps and murmurs spread throughout the room. Rachel stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You're manipulating those numbers completely out of context. She turned to the crowd. My sister has a long history of mental health issues and personal vendettas. This is clearly another episode. Actually, I interrupted, advancing to the next slide. These figures come directly from the Foundation's own internal records, which Bradley was kind enough to secure. I glanced at Bradley, whose face had gone pale, though perhaps not intentionally. I then played a brief audio recording, one that Natalie had provided from her insurance folder. Rachel's voice came through clearly. The beauty of nonprofit accounting is plausible deniability. As long as we keep the program numbers vague and the administrative costs justifiable, no one looks too closely. Bradley signs everything as executive director, so legally, he's responsible. As the recording ended, the room erupted in shocked conversations. Donors looked particularly disturbed, while board members began frantically whispering to one another. "That's doctored," Rachel exclaimed, her composure cracking. "Bradley, tell them this is all fabricated." All eyes turned to Bradley, who stood frozen, his expression a complex mixture of fear, resignation, and what appeared to be relief. "It's not fabricated, Rachel," he said quietly. "I've known about the financial irregularities for months. I just didn't know how to stop it without implicating myself." Rachel's face contorted with rage. "Are you serious right now? After everything I've done for you? Everything I've protected you from?" She turned back to me, her voice venomous. "You think you've won something here? You have no idea what you're doing." "Actually, I do," I replied calmly. 20 minutes ago, I submitted comprehensive evidence packages to the State Attorney General's office, the IRS nonprofit division, and several investigative journalists. The financial fraud is thoroughly documented. I advanced to the final slide, a screenshot of the original text messages between Rachel and Bradley from 5 years ago, messages I had thought lost forever. "And as for the personal betrayal that started all this," I continued, "it turns out Bradley kept his own copies of these messages. He may have deleted them from his devices, but as any good forensic investigator knows, digital footprints rarely disappear completely." Rachel lunged toward me, her composure completely shattered. "You vindictive bitch. You think anyone will believe you over me? I've spent years establishing our reputation, our position. You're nothing. You've always been nothing." Before she could reach me, Evelyn stepped between us, her expression cold. "That's quite enough, Rachel. You've done enough damage to this family." The room had fallen into shocked silence. In that moment, my father stood up, his voice breaking as he addressed the crowd. "As Rachel and Miranda's father, I need to set the record straight. 5 years ago, we believed Rachel's claims about Miranda's mental health issues. We were wrong. The documentation Rachel provided was fabricated. We failed one daughter while enabling another's deception, and for that, I am deeply ashamed." Rachel stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, how could you?" "Because it's time for the truth, Rachel," my mother said, also rising to her feet. "All of it." As if on cue, the main doors opened, and 2 serious-looking individuals in business attire entered, accompanied by hotel security. They approached our group directly. "Rachel Wilson Thompson?" one asked, showing identification. "I'm Special Agent Roberts with the Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding the Thompson Foundation's financial activities." The second agent turned to Bradley. "Mr. Thompson, we'll need to speak with you as well." Rachel's face drained of color as she realized the severity of the situation. Her gaze locked with mine, hatred burning in her eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You have no idea what you've done." "Actually, I do," I replied quietly. "I've finally told the truth." As the agents led Rachel and Bradley away for preliminary questioning, the anniversary celebration dissolved into chaos. Guests began leaving in droves, board members huddled in concerned groups, and donors made frantic phone calls. Through it all, I stood in the center of the room, experiencing not the vindication I had expected, but a complex mixture of sadness, relief, and resolve. Evelyn approached me, her expression solemn. "Well, that was certainly more dramatic than even I anticipated." "You knew this would happen," I said. "It wasn't a question." "I suspected," she admitted. "But I didn't know you'd be quite so thorough."
"I'm impressed, Miranda."
"And grateful." My parents joined us, both looking years older than they had at the beginning of the evening. My father couldn't meet my eyes as he said, "We owe you an apology that no words can adequately express." "You believed her because you always believed her," I said simply. "That pattern started long before Bradley. And it ends tonight," my mother said firmly, taking my hand. "If you'll give us a chance to make amends." As the ballroom emptied, I found myself standing with my parents, Evelyn and Natalie, an unlikely alliance formed from the ruins of deception. The perfect anniversary celebration had transformed into something none of us had fully anticipated. A moment of painful but necessary truth. The days following Rachel and Bradley's anniversary party unfolded in a blur of legal meetings, family confrontations, and media inquiries. The story broke in the local press first, prominent charity founders questioned in fraud investigation, before being picked up by larger outlets. Within a week, what had begun as a personal confrontation had evolved into a full-scale investigation into the Thompson Foundation's financial practices. I took a 2-week leave from my firm in Denver, temporarily relocating to a hotel in my hometown to assist investigators with understanding the complex financial maneuvers Rachel had orchestrated. My professional expertise proved invaluable as authorities worked to untangle the web of shell companies, misdirected funds, and fabricated program outcomes. 3 days after the party, I met Bradley at his attorney's office. He looked haggard, the polished veneer of success replaced by the appearance of a man finally facing consequences long avoided. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said as we sat across from each other, his lawyer present but silent beside him. "I'm here because the investigators suggested your cooperation might depend on it," I replied neutrally. "Not for any personal closure." Bradley nodded, accepting this boundary. "I've provided complete financial records to the authorities, including documentation of transactions Rachel concealed from board oversight. I'm prepared to accept legal responsibility for my role as signatory, though I've entered a cooperation agreement that acknowledges Rachel as the primary architect." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know the whole truth." He paused, gathering himself. "What Rachel held over me, what she used to ensure my compliance both in our personal relationship and in the foundation, was evidence of a hit-and-run accident during my junior year of college. I had been drinking at a fraternity party. I panic-driven away after hitting a cyclist. The victim survived but spent months in rehabilitation." I stared at him, processing this revelation. "And Rachel knew about this?" "She discovered newspaper clippings and a letter of apology I'd written but never sent while helping me pack for our honeymoon, Miranda. She immediately recognized it as leverage." His voice broke slightly. "I should have gone to the police back in college. I should have faced those consequences rather than allowing Rachel to use my worst mistake to facilitate years of new ones." "Including betraying me," I said quietly. "Yes." He met my eyes directly for the first time. "What I did to you is unforgivable, with or without Rachel's manipulation. I've spent 5 years in a prison of my own making, but that doesn't absolve me of the pain I caused you. I am deeply, profoundly sorry, Miranda." His apology, while seemingly sincere, didn't trigger the emotional catharsis I might once have expected. Instead, I felt a calm detachment, the perspective of someone who had moved beyond needing his validation or remorse. "I appreciate your honesty," I said finally. "I hope you'll show the same forthrightness with the authorities about both the hit and run and the foundation's finances." As I stood to leave, Bradley asked, "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I considered the question carefully. "Forgiveness isn't something you're owed, Bradley. It's something I might choose to give myself someday, freedom from the weight of what happened. But that's about my healing, not your absolution." Later that week, I had an equally difficult meeting with my parents at their home. The house felt smaller than I remembered, cluttered with photographs documenting a family narrative that had always centered Rachel's achievements while minimizing my own. My mother had prepared an elaborate lunch that remained largely untouched as we navigated the painful conversation. "We've been seeing a family therapist," my father said after an extended silence. "Trying to understand how we participated in Rachel's manipulation for so many years." And what have you learned? I asked, keeping my tone even despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. My mother wiped away tears. That we failed you in ways that began long before Bradley. We established a pattern of believing Rachel's version of events, of prioritizing her needs and perceptions. We allowed her to become the family narrator. When did you start suspecting she was lying about me? About my supposed mental health issues. They exchanged glances laden with shame. About 2 years after you left, my father admitted. Rachel's stories became more controlling, more inconsistent. She began isolating us from anyone who questioned her narrative, friends, extended family, even our neighbors when they asked too many questions about you. Yet you never reached out to me directly, never asked for my side. We were cowards, my mother said simply. Admitting Rachel had lied meant confronting our own complicity. It was easier to maintain the fiction than face how deeply we'd failed you. Their honesty, while painful, created a small opening for potential healing. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement of a shared reality that had been denied for too long. I don't know what our relationship looks like moving forward, I told them, but I'm willing to find out, as long as we commit to truth, even when it's uncomfortable. My most unexpected connection formed with Evelyn Thompson, who invited me to lunch at her home a week after the anniversary disaster. Her house was elegant but warm, filled with books and art that reflected a life of thoughtful curation rather than status-seeking display. I've always admired your authenticity, she said as we settled in her sunroom. Even 5 years ago, when you were younger and less confident, you never pretended to be someone you weren't, unlike my son, unlike Rachel. You orchestrated this entire exposure, I observed. The invitation, the strategic seating arrangements, the technical setup for my presentation. Why not simply report the financial concerns yourself? Evelyn smiled sadly. The Thompson family has a complicated relationship with public image. My husband would have preferred to handle things discreetly, meaning with minimal accountability. I needed someone beyond family influence who had both the professional expertise and the personal motivation to ensure the truth came to light, regardless of consequences. You used me, I said, though without rancor. I provided an opportunity, she corrected gently. You chose what to do with it. And in doing so, you've saved my family from continuing down a path of complicity that would have eventually destroyed us all. 2 weeks after the anniversary party, formal charges were filed against both Rachel and Bradley. Rachel faced multiple counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and financial misrepresentation, while Bradley's cooperation agreement reduced his exposure to lesser charges of financial negligence and failure to exercise proper oversight. Rachel refused to accept any plea arrangement, maintaining her innocence despite the mounting evidence. In a painfully familiar pattern, she attempted to frame herself as the victim of a conspiracy between me, the Thompsons, and overzealous prosecutors. Few seemed convinced, especially as donors and community partners came forward with accounts of Rachel's manipulative behavior and questionable financial requests. The morning the charges were announced, I received an unexpected call from a blocked number. When I answered, Rachel's voice came through, cold and controlled. Congratulations, Miranda. You've finally managed to be the center of attention. I hope it's everything you always wanted. This isn't about attention, Rachel. It's about accountability. She laughed, a hollow sound without humor. Always so self-righteous. You think this ends with me facing charges while you play the victorious hero?
You've destroyed our family.
Mom and Dad will never recover from this public humiliation. You destroyed our family years ago, I replied calmly. The only difference now is that the truth is visible to everyone, not just to me. There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice lower. We could have been extraordinary together. You know, your creativity, my strategic thinking. Instead, you chose this scorched earth approach. You left me no alternative, I said simply. Goodbye, Rachel. As I prepared to return to Denver, I met with Evelyn one final time. She presented me with a proposition that would ultimately reshape my professional path. The Foundation's legitimate programs still serve children who need educational support, she explained. I'm establishing a new board of directors to rebuild from this scandal, focusing on actual impact rather than image. We need someone with financial expertise and unimpeachable integrity to oversee the restructuring." She smiled. "Someone like you." "I'm not a Thompson," I reminded her. "Precisely why you're perfect for the role. You've demonstrated that principles matter more to you than family loyalty or social standing. Those are exactly the values this organization needs to rebuild trust." I didn't accept immediately, needing time to consider whether I wanted to remain connected to a situation with so much painful history. But the seed was planted, an opportunity to transform something broken into something genuinely beneficial. The night before leaving town, I had dinner with my parents and 3 of my oldest friends who had reached out after learning the truth about what had happened 5 years ago. The conversation was sometimes awkward, occasionally emotional, but fundamentally healing. For the first time in years, I felt seen for who I actually was, not who Rachel had portrayed me to be. As we said goodbye, my father embraced me tightly. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become," he whispered. "Not despite our failures, but through your own strength." "We're learning to see clearly," my mother added, her eyes bright with tears. "It's painful but necessary." I drove back to Denver the next morning with a complex mixture of emotions. The exposure of Rachel's deception had not provided the simple vindication I might once have imagined. Instead, it had created a messy, complicated path toward authentic relationships and genuine accountability. A path that would require ongoing commitment from everyone involved. Justice, I was learning, rarely arrived in the neat package depicted in movies. It came in flawed, human-sized portions, accompanied by both relief and new responsibilities. The truth had indeed set me free, but freedom, it turned out, was just the beginning of a much longer journey. 6 months after the anniversary party that changed everything, I sat in a bright corner office overlooking the city park, reviewing the quarterly financial reports for the renamed Horizon Educational Foundation. The organization, Phoenix-like, had emerged from the ashes of the Thompson Foundation scandal with a completely restructured board, transparent financial practices, and a laser focus on actually delivering the educational support it had always claimed to provide. As interim financial director, I split my time between Denver and my hometown, maintaining my forensic accounting practice while overseeing the foundation's rehabilitation. The dual role suited me, allowing me to maintain my hard-won independence while contributing to genuine impact for the children who had been the supposed beneficiaries of Rachel's scheme. The legal consequences of that scheme continued to unfold. Rachel, still maintaining her innocence despite overwhelming evidence, had been indicted on 17 counts of financial fraud, facing potential prison time and significant financial penalties. Her trial was scheduled for the following month, and I had been called as a key witness, a prospect that filled me with determination rather than dread. Bradley, by contrast, had accepted a plea agreement that acknowledged his role as a cooperative witness. He would serve 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by community service and restitution payments. He had sold the mansion and most of their assets to begin repaying defrauded donors and funding legitimate educational programs that actually served children in need. I kept a framed news clipping on my desk, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder of how drastically life could change when truth finally prevailed. The headline read, "Former charity executives charged in multi-million-dollar fraud, whistleblower sister credited with exposing scheme." Beneath it was a photo of me leaving the courthouse after providing testimony to the grand jury, looking composed and professional rather than vindictive or traumatized. My relationship with my parents had entered a new phase, one characterized by careful honesty rather than the easy assumptions of the past. We spoke weekly and I visited monthly for dinner. Each conversation revealed another layer of the dysfunction that had characterized our family dynamic for decades. "I found these while cleaning out the attic," my mother said during one such visit, pushing a portfolio across the table. Inside were dozens of my early artworks, pieces I had created throughout high school and college, many of which had won awards or been featured in student shows. "You kept these?" I asked, surprised. "Of course we did," she replied, her expression pained. "We were always proud of your talent, Miranda. We didn't know how to show it properly. We understood Rachel's achievements, the trophies, the grades, the conventional successes. Your gifts were different, and we failed to appreciate their value. We defined success too narrowly," my father added quietly. "And in doing so, we taught Rachel that image mattered more than substance, while making you feel your talents weren't valued." These conversations were difficult but necessary, peeling back layers of familial patterns that had enabled Rachel's manipulation while undermining my confidence. Through them, we were slowly building a more authentic relationship, one based on who we actually were rather than who we had pretended to be. Perhaps most surprising was my evolving friendship with Evelyn Thompson. At 72, she had emerged from the scandal with renewed purpose, dedicating herself to reforming the foundation while mentoring me in the complexities of nonprofit management. "You remind me of myself at your age," she told me over lunch in her garden. "Unwilling to accept comfortable lies, even when truth comes at a personal cost." "Is that why you reached out to me?" I asked. "You saw yourself in me?" She considered this thoughtfully.
Partly.
"But I also saw in you the daughter-in-law I wish I'd had, someone with integrity, creativity, and genuine compassion rather than strategic charm." Through Evelyn, I gained insight into the Thompson family dynamics that had shaped Bradley, the emphasis on appearance over authenticity, the prioritization of family reputation over individual ethics. These patterns didn't excuse his choices, but helped me understand the context in which he'd made them. The most unexpected development came in the form of the nonprofit I established alongside my work with the foundation. Drawing on my professional expertise and personal experience, I created a support network for victims of financial abuse and exploitation within families. We provided both practical guidance on financial recovery and emotional support for rebuilding trust after betrayal. Financial abuse isn't just about money, I explained during an awareness workshop. It's about power, control, and the exploitation of trust. When the perpetrator is family, the damage extends beyond financial loss to your very sense of security and belonging. The work was challenging but deeply fulfilling, transforming my personal trauma into a resource for others facing similar situations. Each client who regained financial independence and emotional equilibrium helped heal another small piece of my own past wounds. 5 months into this new chapter, I received a request from Bradley to meet before he began serving his sentence. After careful consideration and consultation with my therapist, I agreed to a brief meeting at a neutral location, a quiet corner of the city, Botanical Gardens. Bradley looked markedly different from the polished executive I'd confronted at the anniversary party. Thinner, humbler, dressed in simple clothes rather than custom suits, he seemed to have aged years and months. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said as we sat on a bench overlooking a koi pond. "I'm reporting to the federal facility next week, and I wanted to speak with you one last time." "What more is there to say, Bradley?" He considered this carefully. "Not to ask forgiveness. I know that's not mine to request. But to acknowledge fully one final time the harm I caused you." He met my gaze directly. "When I betrayed you with Rachel, I wasn't just betraying our relationship. I was betraying the person who had truly seen and valued me beyond my family name and position. That's something I've come to understand through therapy and reflection." "And Rachel?" I asked. "Do you understand what drew you to her?" "The familiar," he said simply. Rachel reflected the values I'd been raised with: image consciousness, strategic relationships, the prioritization of appearance over substance. You challenged those values, which was both exhilarating and terrifying. "So you chose the safer option." "I chose the coward's path," he corrected, and continued choosing it for 5 years, allowing Rachel's schemes to progress while ignoring the mounting evidence of wrongdoing. He shook his head. "I'm not asking you to care about my growth or redemption. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the full extent of what I destroyed. Not just our relationship, but your trust in family, in love, in basic human decency." As we parted ways, Bradley hesitated. "For what it's worth, Miranda, the person you've become, the strength you've found, the boundaries you've established, the purpose you've created, is extraordinary. Not despite what happened, but perhaps because of how you chose to respond to it. I watched him walk away, feeling neither the anguish of the past nor any particular warmth, but a quiet acknowledgement that some chapters truly do close, making space for new ones to begin. That evening, I joined my parents, Evelyn, and several board members for dinner at a local restaurant, a small celebration of the Foundation's first successful quarter under new management. As we shared meals and conversation, I observed the genuine connections forming among people united by a commitment to integrity rather than appearance. My father raised his glass to Miranda, who had the courage to speak truth when the rest of us chose comfortable lies. And to new beginnings, my mother added, built on honest foundations. As conversations flowed around me, I reflected on the complex journey from betrayal to this moment of authentic connection. The truth hadn't magically healed all wounds or restored all that had been lost, but it had created space for genuine relationships, meaningful work, and a life aligned with my actual values rather than others' expectations. Justice, I had learned, wasn't just about punishment or vindication. It was about restoration, of truth, of agency, of the possibility of building something better from the ruins of deception. The path forward wouldn't be perfect or painless, but it would be real, and after years of living within others' carefully constructed illusions, reality, with all its messiness and complexity, felt like the greatest gift of all. If my story of standing up to family deception has resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family karma or justice in the comments below. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and personal truth? Or maybe you're still gathering the courage to confront a situation that doesn't feel right. Whatever stage you're at in your journey, please know you're not alone. Like and subscribe if this story helped you feel less isolated in your own family struggles, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for truth, even when it costs you relationships, can ultimately lead to a more authentic life. Thank you for staying with me through this difficult chapter of my life. Your support means more than you know. Remember, sometimes the family we build through honesty and shared values becomes stronger than the one we were born into.